Not all disbelief looks the same. People often talk about atheism as though it's one single category, but that's far from true. The truth is there are many different ways people arrive at disbelief, and just as many ways they live it out. Some are quiet about it, some are outspoken, some are analytical, some are emotional. Each type reveals something unique about how humans respond to questions of faith and reason. There are people who could be called the born realists. They never really had much interest in religion to begin with. Maybe they grew up in a household where belief wasn't strongly enforced, or maybe they just never found the stories convincing. For them, disbelief feels natural, almost like the default setting. They don't spend much time debating the existence of gods, because the whole concept strikes them as irrelevant. Their atheism isn't rebellion, it's just how they've always seen the world. Then there are the deconverted. These are people who once believed deeply, sometimes even dedicating years of their lives to prayer, study, or devotion. Their disbelief came only after a long struggle. For them, atheism feels like an escape, like shedding a heavy burden. They know the texts, the doctrines, the rituals, and because of that, their rejection of it carries a kind of hard-earned clarity. They didn't stumble into disbelief, they fought their way there. Another type is the philosopher. This isn't about being an academic, it's about the mindset. These are the people who dig into arguments, who ask not just whether a belief is true, but whether it's coherent. They pick apart contradictions, study history, and connect dots between psychology, sociology, and myth. They don't just disbelieve, they want to understand why belief exists in the first place. For them, atheism is tied to curiosity, a drive to explore the human mind and the structures it creates. And then there's the angry skeptic. Anger doesn't mean hostility, it means intensity. These are the people who see the harm religion has done and refuse to look away. They can point to wars, abuse, discrimination, or oppression and say, "This is why belief matters. It's not harmless." Their disbelief is sharpened by outrage, but also by compassion. They care deeply about people, which is why the damage done in the name of faith feels so unacceptable to them. These types aren't rigid categories. A single person can move between them at different times in life. Someone who was once angry might mellow into a philosopher. Someone who was once a quiet realist might become outspoken after seeing harm done to a loved one. What matters isn't the label. It's the recognition that disbelief, like belief, takes many different shapes. And it's worth asking yourself, where do you fit? Do you find yourself drawn to analysis or more to lived experience? Do you carry scars from belief, or has disbelief always felt natural to you? Recognizing your type doesn't put you in a box. It helps you understand your journey and the journeys of others who walk the same path in different ways. Another type is the cultural non-believer. These are people who don't hold any faith themselves, but still participate in religious rituals because of family or tradition. They might attend weddings, funerals, or holidays, not because they believe in the divine stories behind them, but because those rituals connect them to loved ones and community. For them, atheism is private, but culture is public. They navigate both worlds with a kind of quiet balance, separating belief from belonging. Then there's the pragmatist. They don't spend much energy debating theology or defending disbelief. They focus on the practical side of life, careers, family, hobbies, and simply don't see why religion needs to be involved. If someone else wants to pray, fine, but for them it's irrelevant. This type of atheist often blends into everyday life without drawing attention to their lack of belief. They aren't avoiding conflict, they just don't see any point in engaging with it. Another group could be called the activists. These are the people who challenge religion not just in private conversations, but in public spaces. They push back when religious institutions interfere with politics, education, or human rights. Their disbelief is tied directly to action. They see religion not as a personal matter, but as a system with consequences, and they dedicate themselves to exposing those consequences. Whether through writing, speaking, or organizing, they carry their atheism outward into society. There's also the quietly curious. These are the people who don't necessarily read philosophy books or attend debates, but they carry a deep curiosity about how beliefs form and why people cling to them. They enjoy conversations, not to win arguments, but to understand. They'll listen to religious friends without judgment and then go home and reflect. Their atheism isn't combative, it's thoughtful, shaped by a steady search for meaning in a world without gods. What's interesting is how these different types often misunderstand each other. The activist might see the pragmatist as apathetic. The cultural non-believer might see the angry skeptic as needlessly confrontational. The philosopher might find the quietly curious too gentle, while the realist might find them too indulgent. But the diversity itself is a strength. It shows that disbelief isn't a single path, but a spectrum of experiences and motivations. These categories aren't walls, they're mirrors. They help us reflect on how we respond to belief, to culture, and to the world around us. And when you think about it, the richness of these types highlights something important. Atheism isn't defined by what it lacks. It's defined by the variety of ways people build meaning, identity, and purpose without gods. How these types of atheists engage with society is just as varied as the types themselves. Some blend in so seamlessly that no one around them even knows they're non-believers. Others stand out, deliberately making their lack of belief part of their public identity. The way people navigate this depends not only on their personality, but also on where they live, and how tolerant or hostile their environment is toward disbelief. The realist type often slips quietly into everyday life. They might not mention their lack of belief at all, unless asked directly. To them, it feels unnecessary to announce it because they don't see religion as a central issue in their lives. They handle religious environments by nodding politely, participating when necessary for family harmony, but without ever really buying into it. The deconverted, on the other hand, can find it harder to stay quiet. Having once been deeply committed, they see through the rituals in a way that makes silence uncomfortable. For them, the songs, prayers, or ceremonies they once performed with conviction may now feel hollow, even manipulative. Some will still go along for family peace, but others find themselves openly resisting, unwilling to pretend anymore. The philosopher often takes a different approach. They may not challenge religion directly in social settings, but they quietly analyze everything. They notice contradictions in sermons, historical inaccuracies in stories, and inconsistencies in moral claims. They may not always say it out loud, but they carry an internal dialogue, weighing and dissecting every claim. When they do speak up, it's often thoughtful, not combative, driven by curiosity rather than confrontation. The angry skeptic, however, tends to have less patience. When they hear religion used to justify harm, they push back. They won't sit silently if someone claims disasters are punishments from above, or if someone tries to impose religious rules on others. Their intensity sometimes makes them unpopular in religious settings, but it also gives them a strong sense of integrity. They refuse to let harmful nonsense pass unchallenged. Cultural atheists navigate society in a more subtle way. They may attend rituals out of respect, participate in traditions for the sake of community, but keep their disbelief to themselves. They treat religion as heritage rather than truth, which allows them to honor family bonds without endorsing the beliefs behind them. They're often seen as peacemakers, able to move between worlds without fully belonging to either. Pragmatists are similar in their quietness, but for different reasons. Where cultural atheists value tradition, pragmatists value simplicity. They don't want conflict, but not because they fear it, because they see no point in wasting time on it. They'll go to church weddings, say grace at family dinners, or stand respectfully during prayers. But in their minds, it's all background noise. Their atheism is practical, not political. Activists, of course, take the opposite route. They engage publicly, challenging religious influence in schools, laws, and politics. They don't just hold disbelief privately, they make it a matter of principle. They're often misunderstood, painted as aggressive when in reality they're motivated by concern for fairness, equality, and evidence-based policy. They're the ones who remind society that disbelief isn't just a private matter when religion keeps insisting on public power. And the quietly curious? They often move gently in both worlds. They ask questions without hostility, listen without judgment, and find ways to connect with people across belief lines. They're not trying to convert or confront, they're trying to understand. And in doing so, they often disarm hostility because they show that disbelief doesn't have to mean division. Together, these types show how atheists interact with religion not as a single block, but as individuals with different personalities, histories, and goals. And when you look at society as a whole, you realize that this diversity is a strength. It means disbelief adapts, survives, and finds expression in countless forms no matter the environment. What's easy to miss is that these types aren't permanent labels. People don't stay locked into one category for life. Belief and disbelief both are dynamic, shaped by experiences, relationships, and the constant push and pull of the world around us. Someone who starts out as a realist, never having cared much about religion, might become more of a philosopher after studying history or science. Their curiosity deepens, and what once felt like indifference becomes an active interest in how belief systems operate. The shift doesn't mean they've changed their core disbelief, but it does mean their relationship to that disbelief has evolved. A deconverted person who carries anger may eventually soften into a pragmatist. The fire of frustration doesn't always last forever. Over time, they may find peace in stepping back, focusing less on what they've rejected and more on what they want to build in its place. Anger can give way to calm, and activism can mellow into quiet self-assurance. The activist who fights against religious influence may, later in life, grow into more of a cultural non-believer. They may still reject the beliefs, but they might find value in traditions as cultural expressions. Rituals reimagined, stripped of supernatural claims, but still tied to family, food, and memory. What once felt like something to reject entirely can later become something to reinterpret. Even the quietly curious might change. For some, curiosity grows into activism. After years of listening and learning, they reach a point where silence no longer feels sufficient. For others, curiosity turns inward. They stop seeking answers from others and instead focus on shaping their own meaning without needing to compare. This fluidity shows something important. Atheism isn't a single stance. It's a spectrum, and where someone falls on it at any given time is shaped by what's happening in their lives. A sudden loss, a heated debate, a new friendship, or a social shift can nudge someone from one type to another. And instead of seeing that as inconsistency, it makes more sense to see it as growth. In fact, one of the strengths of disbelief is that it doesn't demand uniformity. There's no single doctrine to defend, no central authority to obey. This allows for movement, for change, for individuality. Someone can be a skeptic in one season of life, a philosopher in another, a pragmatist later on, and still remain authentically themselves. Recognizing that fluidity can also help build bridges between types. The angry skeptic and the cultural atheist may clash, but when they realize they're just at different points on the same spectrum, they can better understand each other. The philosopher may seem detached to the activist, but both are motivated by a desire to make sense of the world. Each type has its value, and the diversity itself is what makes what becomes clear when you step back from all these categories is that the differences are surface level. They describe style, emphasis, personality, and circumstance. But underneath, there's something shared that ties every type together. It's the commitment to living without leaning on supernatural claims. It's the willingness to shape meaning, morality, and identity without needing gods to dictate them. The realist does this almost effortlessly. They live as if gods don't exist because to them, they never did. The deconverted does it consciously, sometimes painfully, carving out new ground after leaving behind the old. The philosopher does it through analysis, the pragmatist through simplicity, the activist through confrontation, the cultural non-believer through balance, and the quietly curious through reflection. The forms are different, but the essence is the same. And this is where diversity becomes a strength rather than a division. Each type plays a role. The activist pushes back against harmful influence. The philosopher keeps arguments sharp. The cultural non-believer keeps ties to family alive. The pragmatist normalizes disbelief as ordinary. The quietly curious opens conversations. The angry skeptic keeps injustices in the spotlight. None of these roles cancels the others. They complement one another. It's easy to think of atheism only in terms of rejection, of saying no to gods, no to dogmas, no to authority. But when you look closely at the variety of ways people live their disbelief, you start to see something more. It's not just about what people refuse, it's about what they create in the space left behind. A life shaped by evidence, compassion, humor, or simple practicality. A life built on human terms. So the question, which type of atheist are you, isn't really about putting yourself in a box. It's about reflection. It's about noticing how you approach disbelief, how you relate to others who believe, and how you carve meaning out of a universe that doesn't hand it to you. And maybe the most important point isn't which type you are right now, but that you get to choose. That freedom itself is the defining feature. Because unlike religion, disbelief doesn't require conformity. You don't need to match anyone else's path. Whether you're analytical or emotional, quiet or outspoken, skeptical or accepting, you belong simply by being honest with yourself. That's the thread that unites all the types. And in the end, that honesty is worth more than any label.